Okay, so today we're diving into something that's been in the news quite a bit lately, and it really gets to the heart of what we talk about on this show, freedom of expression, how it plays out, especially when you're dealing with satire and comedy.
But particularly when that satire is aimed at those in positions of power, right?
Exactly, because it's easy to talk about free speech in the abstract, but things get really interesting when it bumps up against the realities of politics and power dynamics.
Right. And we've got this really fascinating case study to unpack today that highlights all of these tensions.
We do, and it all starts with a conversation that Prime Minister Modi had with Lex Fridman just last week.
Okay, I'm familiar with that one. It was making the rounds online.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me was how he was talking about the importance of criticism in a democracy. Like he was genuinely emphasizing the need for it. He even brought up some old wisdom about keeping your critics close.
It does make you think about the image he's trying to project, a leader who's open to different viewpoints and maybe even welcomes a bit of challenge.
Right. And that's what makes what happened just a week later even more interesting. And this is where comedian Kunal Kamra enters the picture.
Okay, yeah. Kamra, he's not exactly known for holding back.
Exactly. So he's doing a stand-up set in Mumbai at this club called Habitat. And during his act, he makes this joke about the Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Eknath Shinde.
I'm guessing this joke wasn't exactly a gentle ribbing.
Not really. It was specifically about this big political move that Shinde made back in 2022 against Uddhav Thackeray.
Ah, right. That was a huge story. Everyone was following it.
Yeah, so Kamra uses this event as material for his comedy, which is kind of his style, right? He's known for taking aim at those in power and not shying away from controversy.
And this is where things take a bit of a turn, right? Because the reaction to this joke wasn't just a few people grumbling online.
Definitely not. Supporters of Shinde actually went to the Habitat Club, and from what we've seen and heard, they stormed the place and vandalized it.
Well, hold on. So they went from a joke to actually causing damage. That's a pretty serious escalation.
Yeah, and it raises some really big questions about how far is too far when it comes to reacting to criticism, even if it's in the form of comedy.
Right. Like, at what point does a response become disproportionate to the perceived offense? And who gets to decide that?
And the story doesn't end there because after this whole incident, an FIR was filed against Kamra.
An FIR. So we're talking about an actual legal complaint now.
Yeah, it was filed by a Shinde Sena MLA named Murji Patel. And it's interesting how Kamra responded to all this. He posted a picture of himself holding up a pocket constitution.
I saw that. Yeah, it was a pretty powerful image. It really brings up the whole debate about freedom of speech and where the lines are drawn.
And this is where Devendra Fadnavis comes in.
Yeah.
Because he made this statement afterwards saying that the Constitution allows for free speech, but with limitations.
Okay, so it's not like you can just say anything you want. There are boundaries.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so tricky. Like, who gets to decide where those boundaries are and what happens when you cross them, especially when you're talking about something as subjective as humor?
It's like you're being offered this menu with all these options, but then you find out that most of them are off limits.
Exactly. And what's even more concerning is the impact all of this had on Habitat Comedy Club because they ended up having to close down indefinitely.
Yeah, so they basically got shut down because of a joke told by one of their performers?
It seems that way. And their statement afterwards was really heartbreaking. They talked about feeling shocked, worried, and extremely broken. They even said they felt like a proxy for the performer.
That's a really powerful statement. It highlights how vulnerable these spaces for expression can be and how actions against one person can have a ripple effect on the entire ecosystem.
And here's where things get even more interesting. Because when you contrast all of this with some of the things that Prime Minister Modi has said in the past, it paints a very different picture.
Okay, let's hear it. What has he said before that contradicts this?
Well, just a week before this whole thing with Kamra happened, he was talking to Lex Fridman. And he said that for a strong democracy, genuine criticism is necessary.
Interesting. And he also said something about allegations benefiting no one and just causing unnecessary conflicts.
Right. So if you take those statements at face value, wouldn't you think that a joke, even a politically charged one, could be seen as a form of genuine criticism?
Yeah, it makes you wonder how those statements square with the reaction we saw to Kamra's set.
And it doesn't stop there, because if you go back even further to 2018, Modi actually said, I want this government to be criticized.
Right.
Criticism makes democracy strong.
Wow. Okay, so he's explicitly said that he wants to hear criticism.
He did, and even before that, in 2016, he said that governments must be analyzed and held accountable.
So we've got a pattern of statements here that seem to directly clash with the actions taken against Kamra.
And I think it's important to remember what satire is all about. It's not supposed to be some dry academic analysis. It uses humor, exaggeration, and irony to hold up a mirror to those in power.
Right. It's about making a point, but often through a lens of humor, which can make it even more powerful and sometimes more provocative.
Exactly. And so the question becomes whether the content of Kamra's joke, regardless of whether you personally found it funny or not, truly warranted the reaction it received.
That's the key point, right? Was the response proportionate to the perceived offense, or did it cross a line?
And I think it's worth thinking about the bigger picture here, because if a joke can lead to vandalism, legal complaints, and the shutdown of a venue, what does that say about the future of other forms of expression?
It's a slippery slope argument, right? Like, if this is the reaction to a stand-up routine, what happens to other forms of satire, like mimicry, or even just sharing memes online?
Exactly. And now I know that Kunal Kamra has a history of being outspoken and controversial.
He's definitely not afraid to push buttons and make people uncomfortable.
Right. But when you look at the broader implications of this whole situation, it raises some fundamental questions about the health of our democracy.
Because if we can't even laugh at those in power without facing serious consequences, what does that say about our society?
That's the question that keeps coming back to me. And it makes you wonder if those who talk so much about free speech on the international stage should maybe take a closer look at what's happening right here at home.
Because there seems to be a real disconnect between the ideals that are espoused and the reality on the ground.
So as a final thought for everyone listening, if criticizing those in power, even through humor, becomes something we have to fear, what kind of democracy are we left with?
It's a question worth pondering because the answer will shape the kind of society we ultimately become.
And that's where we'll leave it for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into a topic that's clearly complex and multifaceted.
It's been a fascinating discussion, and it's definitely something we'll all be watching closely to see how it unfolds.
And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into the issues that matter most in today's world.